Hey guys, tonight we're going to get very, very quiet. We're drifting back to the 19th century to explore a system of communication that was entirely silent, incredibly subtle, and so fraught with peril that a single mistake could get you socially cancelled forever. We're talking about the secret, folded language of Victorian-era calling cards. Honestly, the anxiety alone is enough to put you to sleep. You would not have survived. I would not have survived. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is for you. I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The air is thick with the taste of coal, smoke and damp wool. Through the window of your handsome cab, the gas lights of London bloom like pale, fuzzy flowers in a swirling, yellow minus grey fog. The rhythmic clatter of your horse's hooves on the wet cobblestones is the soundtrack to your arrival. You finally made it. You have secured respectable, furnished rooms in a decent part of the city, a small but hopeful foothold in the largest, wealthiest, and most bewildering metropolis on earth. Your ambition is a small, warm flame inside you. You have a modest but sufficient income, a decent education, and a desire to make your way in the world, to be a part of the grand, churning machine of Victorian society. But, as the days turn into weeks, you discover a strange and disconcerting truth. You are invisible. You are a ghost at the feast. You walk through Hyde Park and see the parade of fine carriages, the ladies with their parasols, the gentlemen tipping their top hats. You stroll past the magnificent, stained townhouses of Belgravia and Mayfair, catching glimpses of glittering chandeliers through tall windows. Society is all round you, a vast, intricate, and energetic dance, and you are not invited. You don't know the steps. You don't even know how to get into the ballroom. How do you meet people? You can't simply knock on a door and introduce yourself. That would be unthinkable, an act of social madness. You can't strike up a conversation with a stranger in a public place. Appallingly forward, you begin to feel the oppressive weight of the city's anonymous millions, the crushing loneliness of being a well-dressed nobody. Your landlady, a kind but formidable woman who has seen hundreds of hopefuls like you come and go, offers a piece of cryptic advice one afternoon. You'll be wanting to make your calls, I expect, she says, dusting a porcelain figurine. No one will know you're here until you do. Calls? You imagine the awkwardness of visiting a complete stranger. But she clarifies, the call is not the point. The call is merely the vehicle for the delivery of the true message. And that message is printed on a small piece of cardboard. You need a calling card. You begin to understand. This small, rectangular object is not a mere accessory. It is your passport. It is your ambassador. It is your entire social existence distilled onto a piece of pasteboard. In a society without telephones, without social media, the calling card is the fundamental to love connection. It is how you announce your arrival, how you request an acquaintance, how you maintain a friendship, how you signal your intentions. Without a calling card, you are a social minus entity. The very idea seems simple enough, but you soon learn that it is a minefield of unspoken rules. The entire system is a complex, silent language, and you don't even know the alphabet. You begin to see them everywhere. These little white rectangles. Hey butler accepting one at a grand front door, placing it carefully onto a silver tray. Hey lady in a shop, pulling a delicate silver case from her handbag to retrieve one. Here's something historians still debate how rigidly were these rules. The ones you're about to learn actually followed. The hundreds of etiquette manuals published in the Victorian era laid out the laws in terrifying minute detail. But were these books a reflection of how the true upper crust, the people who never had to worry about their position, actually behaved? Or were they anxious guidebooks for the rising middle class, the nouveau rich, desperate to learn the codes and avoid a fatal misstep? The likely answer is a bit of both. The rules were real, the stakes were high, and for a newcomer like you, they were absolute. You look out your window at the endless procession of carriages and veiled faces. The challenge seems immense, but you now have a starting point, a first, concrete step on the treacherous ladder of London society. Your ambition has a new focus, a tangible goal. Before you can hope for an invitation, before you can even dream of a conversation, you must first get your name, in the correct font and on the correct size of car, into your hand. Your first call is not to a grand townhouse, but to a stationer's shop. The next day, you find your way to a respectable stationer's shop on a smart miners-looking street. The bell above the door jingles politely as you enter. The air inside smells of paper, ink, and beeswax. The shop is a quiet, orderly temple dedicated to the tools of communication. Behind a polished mahogany counter, a man with a stern but professional demeanor looks up from a large ledger. He is the high priest of pasteboard, and you are here for your first sacrament. You explain your purpose. You require a set of calling cards. The stationer gives you a look that is both appraising and slightly pitying. He can spot a novice a mile away. He doesn't show you a dizzying array of options. He informs you of the rules. For a gentleman, he states, his voice flattened authoritative, the card should be of a modest size, no larger than 3 inches by 1.5. He pulls out a sample. It is small, almost comically so to your modern eyes, but perfectly proportioned for a lady, slightly larger, to accommodate her husband's name as well, should she be married. The quality of the card itself is paramount. It must be a fine, thick, unglazed pasteboard. Bristol board is the preferred material. Anything flimsy or, heaven forbid, glossy, would be a sign of catastrophic vulgarity. The color is not up for discussion. It must be white, a brilliant, uncompromising white. No tinctures, the stationer says, with a faint shudder, as if the mere thought of a cream or ivory card is physically painful to him. Then comes the most important element, your name. The stationer explains that the engraving must be done from a copper plate. Simple printing from type is acceptable for a business card, but for a social calling card, only the fine, raised lettering of engraving will do. This is a crucial distinction. A business card is for trade. A calling card is for society. To confuse the two is a fatal error. And the name itself, it must be your name, and nothing more. No address, no professional titles, no decorations. Your address is a private matter. If someone wishes to reciprocate your call, they will know where to find you through the intricate social grapevine. To print your address on the card would be a desperate, forward gesture, implying you expect a return visit. It would be like a tradesman leaving a flyer. The font is another minefield. The stationer shows you a few acceptable scripts. They are elegant, clear, and unadorned. The most fashionable, he informs you, is a simple, clean script that resembles handwriting. No Gothic lettering, no flamboyant flourishes. The height of good taste is a powerful, understated simplicity. The more secure your social standing, the less your card needs to shout. Here's a curious detail that etiquette manuals of the time stressed endlessly: the use of prefixage. For a gentleman, the card would simply read Mr. John Smith. However, if you were the eldest son of a family with some standing, your father might be Mr. Smith, while you would be Mr. John Smith, to avoid confusion. For an unmarried lady, it would be Miss Smith. If she had younger, unmarried sisters, she would be Miss Smith, and there would be Miss Jane Smith and Miss Elizabeth Smith. The subtle hierarchy is embedded in every detail. As the stationer takes down your details, you feel a strange sense of gravity. This is not like ordering business cards online. This is a solemn act of defining your public self. This small piece of cardboard will be your proxy. It will travel to houses you may never enter. It will be scrutinized by butlers and ladies' maids. It will lie on silver trays next to the cards of lords and ladies. It is a tiny boat you are launching into the vast, treacherous ocean of London society. There is a historical debate about the exact origin of the calling card. Some trace it back to 17th-century France, where they were used to announce the arrival of aristocratic visitors. Others see a connection to the trade cards of 18th-century England. By the Victorian-era, however, the calling card had evolved into its own unique, highly codified species. It was a product of a society that was both increasingly mobile and rigidly stratified, a tool for navigating a world of strangers where social status was everything. The plate will be ready in a week's time, the stationer says, making a final note in his ledger. 100 cards. You pay the fee, which is not insignificant. The cost of the copper plate engraving is a substantial investment. You leave the quiet, orderly shop and step back into the chaotic London street. You feel a new sense of purpose. You have taken the first step. In 1 week, you will be armed with 100 identical white rectangles bearing your name. 100 silent ambassadors, ready to be dispatched. No, you just have to figure out how, when, and where to deploy them. A week later, you return to the stationer's shop. He presents you with a small, elegant box. Inside, nestled in tissue paper, are your cards. They are perfect. The white is brilliant. The board is satisfactorily stiff, and your name, in a simple, handsome script, looks both modest and full of potential. You now possess the essential ammunition for your social campaign, but ammunition is useless without a strategy. Your landlady, taking pity on your obvious confusion, sits you down with a cup of tea and an etiquette manual. The book is a formidable little volume, bound in dark leather, with a title like The Habits of Good Society or Hints on Etiquette and the Usages of Society. As you leaf through its pages, you are plunged into the bewildering world of the morning call. The first and most important rule of the morning call is that it is never, ever made in the morning. This is the kind of deliberate, nonsensical rule that seems designed purely to trip up the unwary. A morning call is an afternoon visit. The acceptable hours are strictly between 3 p.m. and 5 p.m., or perhaps 3 p.m. and 6 p.m., depending on the season and the specific fashion of the moment. To call before 3 p.m. would be an alarming intrusion on the family's private time. To call after 6 p.m. would interfere with the sacred ritual of dressing for dinner. The purpose of the call is not necessarily to have a long, friendly chat. It is a form, ritualized gesture of respect. It is how you maintain your position on the vast, complex web of social acquaintance. You are not dropping by. You are performing a duty. The manual informs you that a call should last no more than 15 minutes. 20 minutes at the absolute maximum. To stay longer is to risk becoming a sticker, a person who does not understand the subtle cues of social pacing. It's a fine art. You must stay long enough to show respect, but not so long as to become a burden. The frequency of these calls is another minefield. You are expected to call on your acquaintances at regular intervals. After being introduced to someone, you must call on them within a week. After attending a dinner party or a ball at their home, you must call within a day or two to show your appreciation. This is known as a party call. If you fail to make these calls, you will be seen as negligent rude. Your name will be quietly dropped from future invitation lists. And who do you call on? As a gentleman, you call on the lady of the house. The call is always directed to her. Even if your primary acquaintance is with her husband, your social obligation is to her. Society is a matriarchy, ruled from the drawing room. Here's a specific, awkward detail. What if you have several acquaintances to call on in the same afternoon? You must plan your route with military precision. You arrive at the first house, leave your card, perhaps have your 15-minute chat, and then move on to the next. A fashionable lady or gentleman might spend their entire afternoon in a carriage, making a whirlwind tour of their social circle, leaving a trail of cardboard breadcrumbs in their way. This ritualized visiting was known as paying calls, or, more picturesquely, a round of calls. There's a fascinating debate among social historians about the function of this rigid system. Was it simply a way for the leisured classes to fill their long, empty afternoons, or did it serve a more profound purpose? The consensus is that it was a powerful mechanism for social gatekeeping, the strict, unwritten rules, the narrow window of time, the precise duration of the visit. It was all a subtle test. It was a way to differentiate between those who belonged and those who were just trying to get in. If you knew the rules, you were part of the club. If you showed up at noon, you were clearly an outsider. The etiquette manual is filled with terrifying warnings. A stranger is not to be stared at. Never appear to be in a hurry. Loud talking or laughing is a certain sign of vulgarity. You feel a fresh wave of anxiety. This is not a friendly visit. It is a performance. And you are an unrehearsed actor about to step onto a very public stage. You place one of your pristine new cards into a small, simple leather case. You check your pocket watch. It is just past 3 p.m. You have the name and address of a gentleman you were briefly introduced to at your club. A man with a well-connected wife. It is time. You hail a cab. Your heart beating a little faster than usual. Your first morning call awaits. The first test will not be with the lady of the house, but with the formidable guardian of her front door. The handsome cab pulls up with a jolt in front of an imposing townhouse. It's a tall, narrow building of pale stone. Its windows like dark, impassive eyes. Every house on the street looks identical. A uniform wall of respectable wealth. You pay the driver, step onto the pavement, and take a moment to compose yourself. You smooth down your coat, check that your top hat is on at a suitably sober angle, and clutch the small card case in your pocket as if it were a talisman. You walk up the 3 stone steps to the front door. It is painted a glossy, intimidating black, and the breast, or knocker, shaped like a lion's head, gleams with a terrifying brilliance. There is no friendly doorbell. There is only this silent, metallic beast. Taking a deep breath, you lift the heavy knocker and let it fall once. The sound is a deep, definitive thud that seems to echo in the pit of your stomach. You wait. A moment later, you hear the sound of bolts being drawn from within. The heavy door swings inward, but only by a few inches, revealing a sliver of the hallway behind it. In this sliver stands a male. This is the butler. He is not a welcoming host. He is a gatekeeper. He is a sentinel. He is a living, breathing social filter. He is tall, impossibly erect, and dressed in a severe black suit. His face is a mask of polite, professional indifference. His job is to protect the family from the endless tide of the unwanted, the unsuitable, and the simply inconvenient. Your first social hurdle is to get past him. Is Mrs. Temberton at home? You inquire, your voice sounding a little thinner than you do like. This is the ritual phrase. You do not ask to see her. You simply inquire if she is at home to visitors. The butler does not answer immediately. His gaze sweeps over you, from the polish on your boots to the brim of your hat. It is a swift, practiced, and utterly comprehensive assessment of your social standing. He is taking in the quality of your coat, the cut of your trousers, the knot of your tie. He is looking for any sign of shabbiness, of vulgarity, of being an imposter. You feel like a specimen under a microscope. Satisfied, or at least not immediately horrified, by your appearance, he gives a slight, almost imperceptible nod. I will inquire, sir, he says, his voice a low, emotional as his murmur. He does not move aside to let you in. He simply stands there, a human barrier, holding the door open just enough to conduct business. Now comes the crucial moment. You retrieve your card case, extract one of your pristine cards, and hand it to him. As a gentleman, you hand him one card. If you were a married lady calling on behalf of your family, you might leave 3 one of your own, and 2 of your husband's, 1 for the lady of the house, 1 for the master. The complexity is dizzying. The butler takes the card. He doesn't glance at it. He holds it carefully, between his thumb and forefinger, as if it were a delicate scientific sample. This small piece of cardboard is now your ambassador. It will go where you cannot. It will speak for you in the silent, inner, sink, the mess of the house. Here's a specific, awkward detail about this transaction. The butler's reaction to your card is the first sign of your fate. If you are a person of known importance or a close friend of the family, he might step aside and invite you into the hall to wait. If you are a stranger, a tradesperson, or someone who has made a catastrophic error in timing, he might simply say, I regret to inform you, sir, that Mrs. Pemberton is not at home. This phrase, "not at home," is a masterpiece of Victorian social code. It does not necessarily mean that Mrs. Pemberton is physically absent from the house. She might be sitting in her drawing room, just 20 feet away. Not at home is a polite, face-minus saving fiction. It means she is not at home to you at this particular moment. It is a gentle but firm rejection. There is no arguing with it. To question it would be a social crime of the highest order. You would simply tip your hat, turn around, and walk away, your social standing slightly diminished. There's a constant, low-minus key debate among historians who study domestic service. How much power did a butler actually have in this situation? Could a butler, based on his own judgment or personal dislike, decide to tell a visitor his mistress was not at home, even if she had given no such instructions? The memoirs of butlers from the period suggest that a trusted, senior butler had enormous discretion. He was expected to know who was good enough and to protect the family from undesirable callers. In a very real sense, your social fate is in the hands of this stern, black-clad servant. Today, the butler doesn't reject you outright. He takes your card, gives another tiny nod, and says, "Please, wait a moment, sir." He then turns and glides silently away into the dimness of the hall, leaving you standing on the doorstep like a petitioner at the gates of a palace. He is taking your card to be judged. The butler vanishes into the hushed interior of the house, leaving you in a state of suspended animation on the doorstep. The black door remains ajar, a tantalizing glimpse into a world you are not yet part of. You can hear the faint, rhythmic ticking of a grandfather clock from somewhere deep inside. Every tick seems to magnify the awkwardness of your wait. What is happening in there? Your calling card, your small cardboard proxy, is now on a journey. The butler carries it not directly to his mistress, but to a specific, crucial piece of furniture in the entrance hall, the card tray. This is not just any tray. It is almost always made of silver, or perhaps fine porcelain or polished brass. It sits on a hall table, a piece of furniture known as a pier table or console, often positioned beneath a large mirror. This tray is the official receiving station for all social callers. It is the focal point of the entire ritual. The butler places your card onto the tray with a quiet reverence. And here, another layer of silent judgment occurs. The tray itself tells a story. On a busy calling day, it might be piled high with the cards of the city's elite. A butler, or a curious lady's maid, could glance at the tray and get an instant snapshot of the family's social standing. Is it filled with cards from respectable addresses? Are there any names bearing titles? The collection of cards is a visible, tangible measure of social success. Your modest little card now lies among them, hoping to be seen as worthy. The butler then proceeds to find his mistress. You might find her in the drawing room, reading a novel or doing needlepoint. He would enter silently, carrying the silver tray with your card lying upon it, and present it to her. "Mr. John Smith has called." He would murmur. Now, the final decision is made. The lady of the house looks at your card. If she doesn't recognize the name, she might ask the butler, "Do we know Mr. Smith?" The butler may reply, "I believe he was introduced to the master at his club last week." She now has several options. If she is tired, has a headache, is expecting a more important visitor, or simply does not feel inclined to make a new acquaintance, she will say, "I am not at home, Jenkins." Jenkins, the butler, will then return to the front door and deliver the polite but firm rejection. Your journey ends there. If, however, she is in a receptive mood, if she has heard her husband speak well of you, or if she is simply curious, she will give the opposite command. "I am at home." This is the magic phrase. It means you have passed the test. You have been deemed worthy of a 15-minute audience. The butler returns to you at the front door. His expression is unchanged, a perfect mask of professional neutrality. But his words decide your fate. "Mrs. Pemberton is at home. Sir, will you please come in?" A wave of relief washes over you. You have cleared the first and highest hurdle. The butler steps aside, opening the door fully, and ushers you into the hall. He takes your hat and gloves, placing them on the hall table next to the silver tray. Your little card has done its job. It has successfully navigated the treacherous path from the front door to the drawing room. Here's a specific, curious detail about the card tray's life after the visit. The cards received were not simply thrown away. They were sorted and managed with great care. A fashionable lady would have a special decorative bowl or a more elaborate multi-minus-tiered rack for displaying the most impressive cards she had received. This was a form of subtle boasting. Leaving the card of a duchess or a famous politician on display for a week was a way of saying, "Look who calls on me." Less important cards would be kept in a drawer or a card album, a record of social debts paid and owed. Historians who study material culture see these trays and card albums as fascinating documents. They are a physical record of a person's social network. By examining the names, a historian can reconstruct the social world of a particular family, seeing who they knew, who they valued, and who was trying to get into their circle. The silver tray was not just a receptacle, it was an archive. The butler now leads you from the hall, up a flight of thickly carpeted stairs, towards the drawing room. The house is hushed and smells faintly of beeswax and dried flowers. You are about to enter the inner sanctum, but as you follow the butler, a worrying thought enters your mind. What if the lady had been not at home? How would you have conveyed your message then? You realize there is a whole other layer to this cardboard language that you have yet to learn. A secret code of folded corners. You are ushered into the drawing room, a symphony of mahogany, velvet, and fringed lampshades. The 15-minute interview with Mrs. Pemberton is a polite, nerve-racking dance of pleasantries about the weather and mutual acquaintances. You manage to navigate it without spilling your tea or saying anything catastrophically stupid. When the 15 minutes are up, you take your leave, retrieved from the drawing room by the ever-present butler. As you walk away from the house, a sense of triumph warring with your still-jangled nerves. A thought strikes you with the force of a revelation. The entire success of that call depended on Mrs. Pemberton being at home. But what if she hadn't been? What if the butler had delivered the polite rejection at the door? How would she have even known you had called? Would your card, left on the silver tray, be enough? Later that day, your landlady reveals the next, and perhaps most peculiar, layer of this silent language. "But," she says, a knowing glint in her eye, "but you didn't just leave the car, did you? You would have turned a corner." She explains that the simple act of folding one of the four corners of your calling card before handing it to the butler completely changes its meaning. It transforms the card from a simple statement of identity into a coded message. This is the sacred, silent grammar of the cardboard language, a system of communication so subtle, it is almost invisible to the uninitiated. This practice of folding corners, or koan, was a highly sophisticated system that allowed a visitor to convey a specific message without ever speaking to the recipient, or even writing a word. Each of the four corners had a distinct and universally understood meaning within polite society. To fold the wrong corner, or to fail to fold a corner when one was required, was a serious social blunder. It was like shouting in a library or using the wrong fork for the fish. It marked you as an outsider. The gesture itself was one of practiced, almost theatrical nonchalance. A gentleman arriving at a townhouse would pause on the top step, pull out his card case, and with a swift, discreet movement of his thumb, bend the appropriate corner of the card before handing it to the butler. It was a fleeting, subtle action, but it was laden with significance. You stare at one of your pristine, unfolded cards. It seems so simple, so innocent. No, you see it as a minefield of potential meanings. The four corners represent for different social scenarios, for different messages you might need to send. This isn't just a passport anymore. It's a telegraph machine, capable of transmitting a range of information with a single, silent fold. Here's a detail that adds another layer of complexity. This language was almost entirely unwritten. You wouldn't find a neat little key or legend in most etiquette books. It was a code that was learned through observation, through whispers from a well-informed friend, or through the gentle correction of a worldly aunt. It was part of the great, unspoken curriculum of Victorian social life. This is one of the reasons it is so fascinating to historians. They have had to reconstruct the rules from scattered references in diaries, letters, and the more obscure etiquette manuals. There is a historical debate about the precise origin and universality of the folded minus corner system. Did it originate in France? Was it used consistently across all of Britain and America? The consensus is that it was most rigorously practiced in the most fashionable circles of major cities like London, Paris, and New York during the latter half of the 19th century. In a provincial town, the rules might have been more relaxed, but for someone like you, trying to make your way in London, knowing the code was essential, you realize with a dawning horror that if Mrs. Pemberton had been out, and you had simply left your flat, unfolded card, the message you would have sent is "My servant dropped this off." It would have been seen as a lazy, impersonal gesture, a fulfillment of a social duty with the minimum possible effort. Your chances of ever receiving an invitation from her would have plummeted. The simple, elegant object in your hand now seems infinitely more complex. It holds a sacred language, a set of hidden instructions. You have learned the basic vocabulary, the card itself. Now, you must master the grammar, the subtle art of the fold. You ask your landlady to explain, to give you the key to the code, starting with the most fundamental message of all. The most common fold, your landlady explains, taking one of your cards and holding it as if it were an object of great importance, is the one that says, "I was here myself." It is the fold of personal respect. She demonstrates, her fingers surprisingly nimble, by folding down the top minus right corner of the card. The crease is sharp and deliberate. The transformation is subtle, but to a trained Victorian eye, the meaning is as clear as a newspaper headline. A card with its top minus right corner turned down carries the message this visit was made in person. This was the essential fold for the scenario you just narrowly avoided. If you had arrived at Mrs. Pemberton's house and the butler had informed you that she was not at home, this is what you would have done. You would have expressed your regret, and then you would have presented the butler with your card, its top minus right corner dutifully folded. The butler would have placed this folded card on the silver tray. Later, when Mrs. Pemberton came to inspect the day's social offerings, she would see your card and instantly understand. She would know that you had made the effort. You had hired the cab. You had navigated the London traffic. You had stood on her doorstep and made a genuine attempt to pay your respects in person. You had not simply sent your footman on an errand. This was a crucial distinction. In a world with a large servant class, outsourcing social duties was common. A lady might send her footman around with a stack of cards to drop off, fulfilling her obligations without ever leaving her drawing room. This was acceptable in certain contexts, but it was a lesser form of social currency. It was impersonal. The folded top minus right corner was the mark of authenticity. It was the handwritten signature on a typed letter. It proved you had invested your own time and effort, the most valuable commodities a person of leisure had. Here's a specific, awkward detail of the etiquette. What if you were calling on a household where there were several ladies, a mother and two grown minor sub-daughters? For instance, as a gentleman, you would need to leave 3 cards, one for the mother and one for each daughter. But would you fold the corner on all 3? Etiquette dictates that you would fold the corner only on the card intended for the mother, the senior lady of the house. The other 2 would be left flat. The single folded card would act as a representative for the entire personal visit. The level of minute, almost pedantic detail is staggering. You practice the fold yourself. It has to be done with a certain confidence. A weak, hesitant crease would look amateurish. A crumpled corner would be a disaster. It requires a swift, decisive pinch of the fingers. You imagine yourself on a windy London street, trying to perform this delicate operation with a gloved hand while maintaining an air of sophisticated nonchalance. The potential for fumbling seems immense. The historical evidence for this specific fold is quite strong. It is one of the most consistently mentioned codes in letters and diaries from the period. It seems to have been a fundamental and widely understood piece of the calling card language. While the meanings of the other corners could sometimes vary slightly by region or by decade, the top minus right corner for a personal visit was the bedrock of the system. Why this corner? Why not the top minus left? There's no definitive answer, and it's something historians can only speculate about. Perhaps it was simply an arbitrary convention that, once established, became locked in, or perhaps there was a practical reason. For a right minus-handed person holding a card, the top minus right corner is the most natural and easiest to fold with the thumb. It's a small, ergonomic mystery buried in the heart of a deeply formal ritual. You look at the card in your hand, with its freshly folded corner. It seems to have gained a new power. It is no longer just a name on a piece of cardboard. It is a sworn testimony. It says, I, John Smith, was physically present at this location on this day. I climbed your steps. I knocked on your door. I did my duty. You have learned the first verb in this silent language. Now that you know how to say I am here, your landlady explains, you must learn how to use the other corners to convey the other essential messages of a polite social life, messages of joy, of sorrow, and of farewell. Now, for happier occasions, your landlady says, a rare smile touching her lips. Suppose the Pembertoness announce that their eldest daughter is engaged to be married, or that Mrs. Pemberton has successfully given birth to an heir. These are moments that require an immediate and correct social acknowledgement. To fail to do so would be a grave insult. You couldn't simply send a message with your good wishes. That would be far too direct and emotionally expressive for the formal codes of society. Instead, you would express your joy through another silent, folded gesture. You would fold the top minus left corner of your card. She demonstrates again, taking a fresh card and folding down the opposite top corner from the one before. A crease in the top minus left signifies congratulations. The French term for this was felicitation. This fold was a wonderfully efficient tool. It allowed you to participate in the great joys of your social circle without having to intrude on the family during a busy and exciting time. When a family announced an engagement or a birth, they would be inundated with well minus wishes. It would be impossible and impractical for them to receive every single person for a 15-minute call. So you would make your congratulatory call. You would arrive at the house, and when the butler appeared, you would hand him your card with the top minus left corner neatly folded. The butler would see the fold and understand its meaning immediately. He wouldn't even need to ask if the lady of the house was at home. He would know that this was a call of felicitation, a message to be delivered, not a visit to be made. Your card would be taken in and placed on the silver tray. When the lady of the house saw it, she would know that you had acknowledged her family's good fortune. Your social duty was done. You had sent your congratulations in the correct, prescribed, and elegantly understated manner. It was a like button for the 19th century. Here's where it gets even more complex. What if you were a very close friend of the family? In that case, simply leaving a folded card might seem a little cold. A close friend would be expected to do more. You might leave the card, but you would also make a point of inquiring more personally after the family's health and happiness. You might even write a short, personal note to accompany the card. The folded card was the baseline, the minimum required gesture. The level of your intimacy with the family would dictate whether you needed to supplement it with more personal actions. Navigating this was a key social skill. This congratulations fold also had a specific lifespan. You would continue to use this fold when calling on the family for a set period of time, after the event perhaps for a few weeks after a birth, or right up until the wedding in the case of an engagement. It was a way of keeping the celebratory message alive. The historical evidence for the top minus left fold is also quite strong, though perhaps slightly less universal than the in-person fold. Some etiquette manuals assign slightly different meanings, or suggest it was a more recent invention. There is a quiet debate among collectors and historians about whether this corner might have also been used for general visits of ceremony, but its primary association was with congratulations. Think about the sheer emotional efficiency of this system. It allows an entire social network to register a major life event. to send a wave of collective approval and support, all without a single word being exchanged. It is a system built for a society that valued emotional restraint and public decorum above all. You could express your delight without the awkwardness of having to find the right words. The fold did the talking for you. You now have 2 corners mastered. The top minus, right for a personal visit. The top minus left for congratulations. You are beginning to build your vocabulary. But society is not all births and weddings. It is also a world of sickness and death. And for these somber occasions, the lower half of the card holds its own sad, silent language. But life, your landlady says, her voice lowering to a more somber, respectful tone, is not all weddings and babies. There will be times of sorrow, and how you behave in the face of another's grief is perhaps the greatest test of your character and breeding. She takes another of your cards, and the mood in the room shifts. She is no longer a teacher of festive etiquette. She is an instructor in the solemn art of social grace under the most difficult of circumstances. When there is a death in a family you know, she continues, you must express your sympathy, but the family will be in deep mourning. They will not be receiving visitors. To attempt to force an audience would be the height of insensitivity. You must, therefore, speak to them without speaking. For this, you turn to the bottom half of the card. She demonstrates by folding the bottom minus left corner. The crease is firm, a small, deliberate wound on the pristine white board. This fold means condolency. It is a silent, respectful expression of sympathy. The protocol is as rigid as it is merciful. Upon hearing of a death, you would make your way to the house of mourning within a few days. The house itself would be a public signal of its private grief, the curtains drawn, the servants perhaps in somber livery. You would knock, and the door would be answered by the butler, his face an even more impenetrable mask of sorrowful duty than usual. You would not ask if anyone was at home. You would know they are not. Instead, you would simply hand the butler your card with the bottom minus left corner folded. You might also, in a low voice, inquire after the family. This was a set phrase, a gentle verbal gesture to accompany the cardboard one. Here's a specific and poignant detail of the ritual in many households. The butler would not only take your card, but he would also present you with the inquiry book. This was a large, leather minus-bound volume kept in the hall during the period of mourning. You would be expected to silently write your name and address in it. There would be no message, just your signature. This book provided the grieving family with a tangible record of all who had called to show their respect, unless they could review later, when the initial shock of their loss had passed. It was a way of feeling the support of their community without having to endure the emotional toll of receiving them. Your folded card, meanwhile, would be placed on the silver tray, a silent testament to your visit. The family would see it, know you had done your duty, that you had acknowledged their pain, and that you had done so with the correct degree of delicacy and respect. A misstep here, folding the wrong corner, or worse, no corner at all, would be unforgivable. It would be seen as a profound, almost cruel, social failure. This practice raises a question that social historians find fascinating. How did this silent language of condolence interact with the rise of dedicated mourning stationery? The Victorians developed an elaborate cult of mourning, which included letters and cards with thick black borders. The thickness of the border would indicate the depth and stage of mourning, shrinking over time as the bereaved slowly returned to society. The consensus is that the two systems worked in tandem. The family in mourning would use the black minus bordered stationery to announce the death and to respond to condolences. In return, their friends and acquaintances would use the folded calling card to express their initial sympathy. It was a perfectly synchronized, silent, cool minus and minus response of grief. You look at the card with its bottom minus left corner turned down. It looks unbalanced, sad. It carries a weight that the other folds do not. It is a gesture of shared humanity in a society that often seemed to prize inhumanly rigid rules. It is a way of saying, I am thinking of you in your time of sorrow, without the clumsy intrusion of words. You have now learned the language of three corners. You can announce your presence. You can celebrate a joy. You can acknowledge a grief. Your landlady looks at the card one last time. There is only one corner left, she says, and it has only one purpose, to say goodbye. There is only one corner left, your landlady says, picking up the last of the 4 demonstration cards, and it is for a message that is neither happy nor sad, but simply necessary. It is the corner you use to say goodbye. She folds the bottom right corner of the card. This final fold, she explains, is a signal for pourprendre, a French phrase meaning to take leave. On a card, it was often abbreviated to its initials P, C. This was the form of departure. If you were planning to leave London for an extended period, perhaps to spend the summer at a country estate, to travel to the continent for a few months, or to visit family in a distant county, you were socially obligated to inform your entire circle of acquaintance. It would be rude to simply vanish, but it would be impractical and emotionally taxing to pay a personal farewell visit to every single person you knew. The C card was the elegant solution. In the week or so before your departure, you would embark on a final round of calls. You would go from house to house. But your intention was not to have a 15-minute chat. Your sole purpose was to leave your card, its bottom right corner neatly folded, with the butler. This single gesture was a masterpiece of social efficiency. It informed the household of your impending absence. It was a polite way of saying, I will not be able to pay my regular calls for a while, but I wish you well. It was a temporary suspension of your social duties, and an explanation for why you would not be seen at the next ball or dinner party. On the receiving end, the lady of the house would see your C card on her silver tray and understand immediately. She would make a mental note, or perhaps a physical one in her social ledger, that you were out of town. She would not expect to see you, and she would not be offended by your absence. When you returned to London several months later, you would be expected to make another round of calls, this time with the top right corner folded to show you were back in person to announce your return, and sent to the social fray. Here's a specific, quirky detail of the C custom. Some people, instead of folding the corner, would actually have C lightly engraved in small letters at the bottom of their card, or, in a pinch, they might even write the letters in pencil themselves. This raises a small but fascinating point of debate among etiquette historians, which method was considered more fashionable. The consensus leans towards the silent, folded corner was seen as more subtle, more elegant, and more in keeping with the unspoken nature of the code. To actually write the letters was a bit more literal, a bit less sophisticated, but it was an acceptable, if slightly less refined, alternative. A more poignant, historical question is what happened when the departure was permanent. What if you were a young man taking up a colonial post in India, or a family emigrating to Australia, with little to no chance of ever returning? The etiquette books are clear that C is for a temporary, but life is messier than the etiquette books. It is highly likely that people in this situation would still use the C fold, but in this context, the simple gesture would be imbued with a deep and unspoken pathos. Both the sender and the receiver would understand that this temporary goodbye was, in fact, the final one. The small, folded corner would carry the weight of a life's journey, a silent, heartbreaking farewell. Your landlady places the 4 cards on the table in a row, each with a different corner turned down. Top right for a visit, top left for congratulations, bottom left for condolences, bottom right for a farewell. There, she says with a sense of finality, that is the language. With these her folds, you can navigate nearly any social situation a gentleman might face. You can speak without ever opening your mouth. You look at the 4 small cards, a complete set of silent verbs. You feel a sense of mastery, of having been initiated into a secret society. You understand the code. You feel ready. But then your landlady gives you a wry look, a hint of amusement in her eyes. Of course, she says, tapping the small, simple card you chose at the stationer's. This is just the bachelor's card. The rules and the power change entirely once a man is married. Then, the real social maneuvering is done by his wife. And for that, she pauses dramatically. She requires a much larger card. A gentleman's card is a simple affair, your landlady says, gesturing dismissively at your neat little rectangle of pasteboard. It is a solo instrument. The card of a married woman, however, is an orchestra. It speaks not just for herself, but for her husband, her children, and the social standing of the entire family unit. She pulls out an example from a small, lacquered box where she keeps mementos. It is noticeably larger than your own card, and the name engraved on it is different in a crucial way. It doesn't say Mrs. Jane Pemberton. It says, simply, Mrs. Pemberton. This was the proper form. A married woman did not use her own first name on her calling card. She used her husband's. She was, in the eyes of society and the law, an extension of him. Her social identity was subsumed into his. The card, Mrs. Pemberton, was the public face of the marital entity, but it was wielded exclusively by her. The wife, your landlady explains, is the family's minister for social affairs. It is her duty to manage the family's social calendar, to pay the necessary calls, and to secure the invitations that will advance her husband's career and her daughter's marriage prospect. The calling card is her primary to love statecraft. The size of her card was larger because it had to do more work. When a married woman made a routine call, she was calling on behalf of herself and her husband. Therefore, when she left her car, she was leaving a card for the lady of the house from the both of them. Here's where the logistics get wonderfully, awkwardly complex. Let's say your acquaintance, Mrs. Pemberton, is calling on her friend, Mrs. Davies. She arrives at the house and is told Mrs. Davies is not at home. Mrs. Pemberton needs to leave cards on behalf of herself and her husband, for both Mrs. Davies and Mr. Davies. How many cards does she leave? The answer, according to the strictest etiquette manuals, is 3. She would leave one of her own Mrs. Pemberton cards, which was intended for Mrs. Davies. Then, she would leave 2 of her husband's small Mr. Pemberton cards, 1 for Mrs. Davies and 1 for Mr. Davies. The butler would receive this small blizzard of pasteboard, and the message would be understood. The Pemberton S have called on the Davies S, and the folding, only Mrs. Pemberton's own card would have the top minus right corner folded down, to signify that she was the one who had made the visit in person. Her husband's cards would be left flat. The entire system is a delicate ballet of representation and delegation, a silent communication of who was present and on whose behalf they were acting. Now, what about the children? The lady had grown minus up. Unmarried daughters who were now officially out in society. Their names would be engraved on her card, beneath her own, so a card might read, Mrs. Pemberton, Miss Pemberton. If there were 2 daughters, it would be the Mrs. Pemberton. This single card now represented 3 people. When she left this card, it was a call on behalf of herself and her daughters. It was a subtle but constant way of reminding society, my daughters are of marriageable age and are available for social engagements. It was a form of gentle, respectable advertising. This practice leads to a fascinating historical debate. Did this system empower or dismoupe Victorian women? On the one hand, it's a clear symbol of the patriarchal structure of society. A woman's identity is literally erased from her own card, replaced by her husband's name. She is legally and socially as dependent. On the other hand, the system gave the married woman enormous social power. She was the one who controlled the family's social interactions. She built the networks, maintained the connections, and ultimately held the keys to the drawing rooms of London. Her husband might be the master of his office or his club, but she was the undisputed queen of the social realm. The calling card was her scepter. You look at your own simple Mr. John Smith car. It seems so blissfully uncomplicated now. It represents only you. It makes no promises, carries no dependence. It is the card of a free agent. You realize that your bachelor status which can sometimes feel lonely, also affords you a certain freedom from the immense and burdensome social machinery that governs family life. Your little card has only one voice. A married woman's card had to speak for a committee. A gentleman's card announces his presence. Your landlady says, summing up the lesson, a lady's card, by which I mean a married lady's card, announces her family's position. There is a world of difference. You begin to understand that the world of calling cards is not a democracy. It is a strict hierarchy, and the social power is concentrated in the hands of the married woman. Her card is the sun around which the lesser planets of her husband's and her daughter's social lives revolve. Let's compare the two side minus by minus side. Your card, the gentleman's card, is small and simple. It bears your name, Mr. John Smith. Its primary function is to maintain your own network of acquaintances, particularly among other men at your club or in your profession, and to pay your respects to the wives of the men you wish to cultivate. When you leave your card, you are acting as an individual. A gentleman's social obligations were, in many ways, simpler. He had his own sphere, the world of business, politics, and the all-male club were a different, less formal set of rules might apply. But when he crossed the threshold into the domestic sphere, the world of the drawing room and the dinner party, he entered his wife's domain. He was, in that context, her social subordinate. Now, consider the lady's card again, Mrs. Pemberton. It is larger. It may contain the names of her daughters. It is the primary vehicle for all formal social interaction between families. It is her card that is used to accept or decline invitations. It is her card that is left after a dinner party. It is her card that is used to build the alliances that will shape her family's future. Here's a specific. Telling detail: a man could never leave a card for an unmarried woman. It would be a scandalous breach of propriety. If you, Mr. Smith, wished to cultivate an acquaintance with the Pemberton family, you would call and leave your card for Mrs. Pemberton. You would never, under any circumstances, leave a card specifically for Miss Pemberton. Your interaction must be with the mother, the gatekeeper. Any interest in the daughter had to be filtered through her. The calling card system was a powerful tool for policing the interactions between the sexes. And what about unmarried women? A spinster or a widow who ran her own household would have her own card. Miss Smith or Mrs. John Smith, using her late husband's name. She would operate socially in much the same way as a married woman, though without the added weight of a husband's career to advance. The calling card was a tool of independence for her, a way to maintain her own social standing. This difference in power and purpose is a subject of great interest to historians of gender. They ask, was the domestic sphere, ruled by women with their calling cards and at-home days, a genuine source of female power, a separate sphere where they could exert real influence? Or was it a gilded cage, a complex and demanding system that kept women occupied with trivialities while men got on with the real work of running the world? The answer is not simple. The system was certainly restrictive, but within those restrictions, women learned to be expert strategists, diplomats, and networkers. The drawing room was their boardroom, and the calling card was their memorandum. You realize that your initial anxiety about navigating this world was somewhat misplaced. As a bachelor, you're a junior player in this game. The real high-stakes maneuvering is being done by the Mrs. Pembertoness of the world. Your role is to play your part correctly, to pay your calls diligently, and to not make any egregious errors. You have mastered the language of the folded corners. You understand the basic difference between the gentleman's card and the lady's. You feel you are almost ready to begin your social campaign in earnest. But there is one more crucial piece of temporal etiquette you must master. It is not enough to know how to call. You must know when, and that means understanding the tyranny of the at-home day. You cannot simply call on a person whenever you feel inclined. Your landlady states, as if explaining a fundamental law of physics, that would be chaos. A lady must have a system. She must have her at-home day. This, you learn, is the master key to the entire weekly social calendar. An at-home day was the one specific afternoon of the week when a fashionable lady would officially open her drawing room to receive callers, she would announce to her entire social circle that, for example, she would be at home on Tuesdays from 4 to 6 o'clock. This was not an invitation to a party. It was a simple declaration of availability. It meant that if you called on her during those specific hours on a Tuesday, you were guaranteed to be admitted. The butler would not say she was not at home. She had pre-assumptively declared herself present and willing to receive. For the lady of the house, this system was a brilliant piece of time management. Instead of having her afternoons constantly interrupted by a trickle of visitors, she could consolidate all her social duties into one intense 2-hour period. During her at home, her drawing room would become a bustling hub of social activity. A steady stream of visitors would flow in on doubt, each one staying for their prescribed 10 or 15 minutes. She might serve tea and small cakes, but it was not a formal tea party. It was a social levee, a reception in miniature. For you, the caller, the at-home day was a crucial piece of information. It was your best and safest opportunity to make a call. Calling on a lady on her designated day was a sign of respect. It showed that you were paying attention to her schedule and valued her time. Conversely, to call on a day when you knew she was not at home could be seen as a slight, unless you had a very good reason. And how would you know a lady's at-home day? This information was not advertised in the newspaper. It was spread through the delicate, informal channels of society. Sometimes, a lady would have it lightly engraved on the corner of her calling card Tuesdays. Or, a mutual friend might mention it in conversation. You must call Mrs. Pemberton. She is at home on Tuesdays. You know, it was insider information. Knowing the correct at-home days for the important hostesses in your circle was a mark of being socially connected. Here's a specific, awkward detail. What if two important ladies both chose Tuesday at-home day? This created a logistical nightmare. You would have to dash from one house to the next, carefully timing your visits to ensure you could pay your respects at both. A lady's choice of at-home day could be a strategic move in itself, sometimes creating deliberate social traffic jams. This system of regulated visiting is a source of fascination for sociologists and historians. It demonstrates the Victorians' obsession with order, efficiency, and the clear demarcation between public and private time. The drawing room, for those 2 hours a week, became a public stay. For the rest of the week, it was a private retreat. The at-home day was the formal mechanism that managed this transition. The historical debate around this practice often centers on the experience of the hostess. Was it an empowering ritual, a chance for a woman to hold court and cement her status as a social hub? Or was it an exhausting, repetitive, and often mind-numbingly boring duty? The diaries of Victorian women reveal a mixture of both. Some women clearly relished the role of the popular hostess, delighting in the flow of gossip and company. Others wrote of the dreadful fatigue and the intolerable dullness of making polite conversation with a dozen people in quick succession. It was, for many, both a duty and a performance. You realize now that the social world is even more structured than you imagined. It runs on a strict, unspoken timetable. Your freedom to call is limited to these narrow, prescribed windows. To succeed, you will need a good memory, a reliable pocket watch, and a well-organized diary. You are armed with your cards. You know their secret language. You understand the weekly schedule. There is only one piece of equipment left to acquire. Your cards cannot simply be stuffed into a pocket. They are a gentleman's accessory, and they require an appropriately elegant home. You must purchase a card case. A gentleman does not simply carry his cards in his hand or, heaven forbid, loose in his waistcoat pocket. Your landlady admonishes. Her tone suggesting such an act would be on par with wearing muddy boots in a ballroom. You must have a case. It is a necessary mark of refinement. Your final preparatory step, you realize, is not one of etiquette, but of equipment. You must acquire a calling card case. This is not just a practical item for keeping your cards clean and undone. It is a personal statement. It is an accessory, a piece of jewelry, and a subtle indicator of your taste and financial standing. You make your way to a different kind of shop now. Not a stationer's, but a tobacconist's or a fine goods emporium. The sort of place that sells elegant trifles for the discerning gentleman. Here, a selection of card cases is laid out under a glass countertop, gleaming like precious artifacts. The choice of material is the first and most important decision. For a gentleman, the options are sober and handsome. A case made of fine, dark leather, perhaps Moroccan or pigskin, is a classic, understated choice. It signals practicality and good, solid taste. For a man with a bit more flair, or a bit more money, a case of sterling silver is the next step up. These are often engraved with intricate patterns or a swirling monogram of the owner's initials. Then you see the truly luxurious options. There are cases crafted from tortoiselle. It's mottled, translucent browns and ambers polished to a deep, lustrous shine. And there are those made from mother minus of minus pearl, their iridescent surfaces shimmering with all the colors of the rainbow. These are the peacocks of the card case world. Beautiful, but perhaps a little too flashy for a young man trying to establish a reputation for serious minus-mindedness. You recall an etiquette manual's stern warning: an ostentatious display of wealth is the surest sign of a vulgar mind. You settle on a handsome, slim case of dark cherry minus red leather with a simple silver clasp. It is elegant but not showy. It feels solid and smooth in your hand. The design of the case is ingenious. It's typically a slim, rectangular box, hinged at the bottom. You press a small clasp at the top, and the lid springs open, revealing the stack of your pristine cards inside. The gesture of retrieving a card from its case was a small piece of social theater in itself. It had to be done smoothly, without fumbling. A gentleman would open the case, deftly slide out a single card with his thumb, and present it to the butler, all in one fluid, confident motion. Here's a specific, charming detail for collectors and historians. Many of these cases were designed with a small A- memoir, a tiny ivory or celluloid slip tucked into a pocket inside the lid. On this, a gentleman could discreetly pencil in the names and at-home days of the hostesses he needed to call on, a cheat sheet for the complex social calendar. The lady's card case was, naturally, a different species altogether. While a gentleman's was a handsome tool, a lady's was a piece of exquisite jewelry. Hers would be slightly larger to accommodate her bigger cards, and often more ornate. Mother minus of minus pearl, intricately carved ivory, and tortoiselle inlaid with silver or gold were common. A lady's card case was an essential part of her public ensemble, chosen to complement her dress, her gloves, and her parasol. It was as much a fashion statement as her bonnet. There's a quiet historical debate about the social signals sent by these cases. Did the material of your card case genuinely affect how you were perceived? While it's unlikely a butler would turn you away solely for having a cheap case, it was certainly part of the overall picture. The aggregate of all these tiny details, the polish on your boots, the cut of your coat, the material of your card case created an impression. It was a cumulative test, and every element mattered. You purchase your chosen leather case and slip your cards inside. They fit perfectly. Now, you finally feel complete. You have the uniform, your respectable suit, the ammunition, your correctly engraved cards, and the weapons system, your elegant case. You have learned the rules of engagement, the morning call and the secret codes, the folded corners. You have the strategic map, the at-home days. You are as prepared as you will ever be. You are ready to step out into the world and begin the great, awkward, silent conversation of Victorian society. You feel a sense of confidence, of readiness, though you are also aware that with knowledge comes a new and more terrifying burden, the fear of getting it wrong. Now that you know the rules, you can truly appreciate the horror of committing a social crime. Armed with your newfound knowledge and your elegant leather case, you begin to make your calls. You are diligent, you are correct, and you are, for the most part, successful. You are slowly, carefully weaving yourself into the social fabric of London. You are sometimes admitted for a pleasant 15-minute chat. Other times, you are politely refused, and you leave your card with the top minus right corner correctly folded. You are playing the game. It is during an at-home one Tuesday afternoon. In the crowded drawing room of a Mrs. Finch, that you witness it. A social catastrophe. A small, quiet, but utterly devastating act of what can only be described as social suicide. The drawing room is buzzing with the low hum of polite conversation. You are balancing a teacup and a small slice of seed cake, trying to look both comfortable and attentive. A new guest is announced by the butler, Mr. Abernathy. Mr. Abernathy is a man you recognize from your club. He is newly wealthy, a fact that is subtly betrayed by the slightly minus fashionable cut of his coating, the overly large diamond pin in his cravat. He has a booming voice and a hearty, confident laugh that is just a fraction too loud for the delicate acoustics of the room. He is trying very, very hard. He makes his way over to the hostess, Mrs. Finch, a woman whose social power is matched only by her formidable expression. He bows a little too deeply and begins to speak, and then he makes his fatal error. While engaging Mrs. Finch in conversation, he reaches into his pocket and pulls out his calling card. This is his first mistake. The card should have been left with the butler in the hall. To bring it into the drawing room is an act of strange and unnecessary forwardness. But it gets worse. He holds the card out to Mrs. Finch as he speaks. I was so delighted to receive your kind invitation. He booms, brandishing the card as if it were a ticket for admission. A hush falls over the small group around the hostess. You can almost feel the collective intake of breath. Mrs. Finch's eyes narrow. She does not take the card. She looks at it, floating there in the air between them, as if it were a dead insect. Mr. Abernathy, she says, her voice as cold and clear as ice. You are already here. I have no need of your call. The rejection is absolute and public. Mr. Abernathy's face, a moment before flushed with confidence, pales. He seems to shrink inside his fashionable coat. He fumbles with the offending card, eventually managing to stuff it back into his pocket. The conversation around them sputters back to life. But a social bomb has been detonated. Everyone in that room has witnessed his mistake. Here's the specific, brutal etiquette that Mr. Abernathy has violated. A calling card is your representative. It is your ambassador. You sent it in when you cannot go in yourself. Once you have been admitted to a person's presence, the card's function is over. To present it to the hostess in person is a fundamental misunderstanding of the entire system. It implies that you think the social interaction is a transaction, that the card is a coupon to be redeemed. It is, in the silent language of the drawing room, an unforgivable vulgarity. In the following weeks, you observe the consequences. Mr. Abernathy's name seems to vanish from the social world. You no longer see him at their homes you attend. You hear through club gossip that an invitation he was expecting to a prestigious dinner party was quietly lost. He has been caught. To be caught is the social death penalty of the Victorian-era. It is a quiet, bloodless, but utterly ruthless process. It means that people who once knew you will now look straight through you, as if you are made of glass. A lady will not see your bow on the street. A gentleman will not acknowledge your presence in the club. You have been erased from the social map, and it can all happen because of a single, clumsy gesture with a small piece of cardboard. There is a historical debate about how common and how permanent this practice of cutting really was. The popular novels of the era are filled with dramatic scenes of characters being socially ostracized. The reality was likely more nuanced. A minor gaffe might be forgiven. A powerful family might be able to survive a mistake that would ruin a newcomer like Mr. Abernathy. But for those on the precarious lower rungs of the social ladder, a single serious mistake could indeed be fatal to their ambitions. You feel a chill run down your spine. You think of your own careful, diligent course. You have been so focused on learning the rules that you haven't fully appreciated the terrifying consequences of breaking them. The world of calling cards is not just a quaint and awkward game. It is a high-minus stakes arena where the slightest misstep can lead to total annihilation. You clutch your own card case in your pocket, a renewed sense of respect and fear for the power it contains. Time passes. You continue your careful navigation of London society. Your collection of acquaintances grows. One spring morning, You read an announcement in the Times that sends a ripple of excitement through your social circle. Miss Eleanor Finch, the daughter of the formidable Mrs. Finch, is to be married. An engagement and a wedding are not just personal events. They are major social realignment. They are a merger of two families, a reshuffling of the deck, and the entire complex process is managed and communicated through the intricate, silent language of the calling card. This, you soon learn, is the most advanced level of the game. The moment the engagement is announced, the first wave of cards begins. You, along with every other acquaintance of the Finch family, make your congratulatory call. You arrive at the house, hand the butler your card with the top minus left corner folded for felicitation, inquire after the family, and depart. The silver tray in the Finch's hall would be overflowing with these small white flags of approval. Then comes the wedding itself. After the ceremony and the honeymoon, the new couple, let's say they are now Mr. and Mrs. Davies, must formally announce their entry into society as a couple. And how do they do this? They send out their own brand minus new set of cards. This is a very specific and symbolic package. They would send out a Mr. and Mrs. Davies card, a large card announcing their new marital union. Tucked along with it would be two of the groom's individual Mr. Davies cards. This package would be sent to everyone in both of their social circles. It is a formal declaration we are now a single social unit. Here is the part that requires careful bookkeeping. Upon receiving this package, you, Mr. Smith, are now socially obligated to call on the newlyweds. This is a crucial, time-minus sensitive duty. You must call within 10 days of receiving their cards. To fail to do so is to snub the new couple at the very beginning of their married life. It is an insult of the highest order. So you would make your way to the address of the newlyweds, and you would leave your own set of cards, one for the new Mrs. Davies and one for the new Mr. Davies. This flurry of cardboard is a social reset button. It dissolves the old networks and establishes a new one. All the friends of the bride are now formally introduced to the groom, and all the friends of the groom are introduced to the bride by sending and receiving these cards. The two formerly separate social circles are merged into one. The historical debate around this practice centers on its social function. Was it merely a charming tradition, or was it a crucial mechanism for social consolidation? The consensus is that it was vital. In a society where family alliances were key to wealth and power, the wedding was a strategic merger. The calling card ritual was the formal, public ratification of that merger. It was a way of testing the new network. Who would call on the new couple? Who would neglect their duty? The pile of cards on the newlyweds' silver tray was their first, crucial assessment of who their true friends and allies were. A particularly awkward and specific scenario arises. What if you were a friend of the bride's family, but you disapproved of the match? You could not simply refuse to call. That would be an open declaration of hostility. Instead, you might forget to call on the newlyweds. Your absence would be noted. It was a form of silent, passive-aggressive protest, a subtle way of signaling your disapproval without causing an open rift. You successfully navigate your duties. You leave your congratulatory card for the engagement. After the wedding, you receive the Mr. and Mrs. Davies cards, and within the week, you make your call, leaving two of your own cards at their new home. You have played your part perfectly. You have acknowledged the new alliance and secured your place in their new, combined social world. The complexity is dizzying. The sheer number of cards, the precise timing, the unspoken obligations, it's a full-time job. You are beginning to understand that Victorian social life is not a leisure activity. It is a highly structured, demanding profession. And you haven't even touched upon the most complex set of rules of all, the etiquette of mourning. A few months after the wedding, a somber mood falls over your corner of London society. A prominent elderly gentleman, the patriarch of a family you know, passes away. The news travels quickly, not through headlines, but through the quiet, efficient channels of social gossiping. Eventually, through the post. A few days after his passing, a card arrives at your rooms. It is not a calling card, but a formal announcement card. The card itself is a star, shocking white, but it is framed by a thick, black border, at least a quarter of an inch wide. This is a mourning card. You learn that this is not just a card, it's a precisely calibrated signal. The language of mourning stationery is a science in its own right, a visual code that communicates the depth and stage of a family's grief. The thickest black border, like the one on the card you've just received, signifies the first, deeper stage of mourning, known as deep mourning or first mourning. It declares that the family is in complete social seclusion. They will not be attending any parties, dons, or public entertainments. Their house is a house of sorrow. This black border was not confined to announcement cards. For the duration of the mourning period, all of the family's personal stationery, their letter-minus writing paper, their envelopes, and their calling cards would be edged in black. As time went on, the border would gradually shrink. After a year, it might be reduced to a thin, elegant black line, signaling a transition to second mourning. Eventually, after a prescribed period which could be up to 2 years for a widow, the border would vanish altogether, a sign that the bereaved was ready to enter society. Seeing a black bordered calling card on a butler's silver tray sent an immediate and powerful message. It explained why the person was not present at social events and ensured that no one would commit the gaffe of inviting a person in deep mourning to a frivolous party. Here's a specific, strange detail of this etiquette. The servants of a household in mourning were also part of the performance of grief. The butler and footman might wear black armbands, and the family's carriage might have its crest temporarily covered. The entire household, from the lady in her black crepe dress to the stationery on her desk, was a unified public expression of sorrow. As a friend or acquaintance, your duty is clear. You have already learned the gesture of the folded bottom minus left corner. You make your call to the house of mourning, leave your correctly folded card, and perhaps sign the inquiry book. You expect no response. However, after a few weeks, you might receive another black bordered card in the post. This would be the family's calling card, sent out to everyone who had left a card or signed the book. This was not an invitation. It was a return thanks card. It was a formal, collective acknowledgement of all the expressions of sympathy they had received. It was a way for the family to thank their entire social circle without having to write hundreds of individual, emotionally draining letters. The historical debate around these elaborate mourning rituals is fascinating. Were they a genuine and helpful framework for processing grief, a set of clear rules that guided people through a difficult and disorienting time? Or were they a tyrannical and oppressive system, particularly for women, that forced people into an ostentatious and oft unperformative display of sorrow? The answer, as with so much of Victorian life, is likely both. For some, the clear structure, the specific clothes to wear, the specific stationery to use, the set timetable for returning to society was a source of comfort. It meant they didn't have to make any decisions during a period of immense emotional turmoil. For others, especially widows who were expected to endure years of social isolation, it was a heavy, suffocating burden. The widow's weeds, the heavy, drab black clothing they were expected to wear, became a kind of prison uniform. You look at the black bordered card on your mantelpiece. It is a stark reminder of the fragility of life. Even in this world of rigid rules and solid seeming institutions, the silent language of the calling card, you realize, is not just for navigating the happy or awkward moments of life. It is also a tool for managing its greatest sorrows, a way of containing and communicating the massness of human grief within any black bordered rectangle. It is the system at its most somber, its most respectful, and its most deeply human. As the seasons turn, you become more and more adept at the intricate dance of the calling card. You have your smart leather case. You know your at-home days. You can fold a corner with a discreet, confident flick of the thumb. You have successfully navigated congratulations, condolences, then temporary farewells. You feel as though you have mastered the system. And then, you encounter a situation so complex, so layered with nuance, that you realize you have only been scratching the surface. You are invited to an afternoon concert at the home of a Lady Blevins, a hostess of immense social standing. This is a significant step up for you. After the concert, you know you must make a party call within 2 days to show your appreciation. But there is a complication. Lady Blevins has a house guest staying with her, a visiting cousin from the countryside, a Miss Agatha Primrose. You were introduced to both of them at the concert, so when you make your call, who are you calling on? You consult your etiquette manual, which seems to have a section for every conceivable social permutation. The rule, you discover, is that your call was officially to the hostess, Lady Blevins. However, it would be a terrible sight to ignore her house guest, to whom you are formally introduced. Therefore, the correct procedure is as follows. You arrive at the house. You hand the butler 2 of your cards. One is for Lady Blevins. The second is for Miss Primrose. Now, the folding. You must fold the top minus right corner of the card for Lady Blevins, to signify your personal visit of thanks to your hostess. The card for her guest, Miss Primrose, should be left flat. This tiny distinction signals that your primary call is to the hostess, but you are politely acknowledging the presence of her guest. But the complexity deepens. What if Lady Blevins is not at home when you call? You still leave the 2 cards, folded in the same way. But how does Miss Primrose know that you have specifically acknowledged her? The butler, upon receiving the cards, would announce to Lady Blevins later, "Mr. Smith called. My lady, he left a card for you, and one for Miss Primrose." The message would be relayed. This unwieldy, intricate system is the calling card ritual at its most baroque. It is a language capable of expressing not just simple ideas, but complex, subordinate causes of social intention. The 2 cards, one folded into one flat, say, in their silent way, "I am calling in person to thank you, Lady Blevins, for your hospitality, and I also wish to pay my respects to your guest, Miss Primrose, to whom I had the pleasure of being introduced." It is a whole paragraph of social information conveyed through 2 small pieces of cardboard. Here's another wonderfully awkward scenario. What if you owe a call to a lady, but you happen to see her out in Herge and Hyde Park? Can you simply tip your hand, consider your social duty done? Absolutely not. A chance meeting in public, no matter how pleasant, has no bearing on the formal economy of the calling card. It does not count. You are still obligated to make your formal call at her house within the prescribed time. To do otherwise would be to try and substitute informal luck for formal duty, a cardinal sin in the Victorian rulebook. Historians often marvel at the sheer inefficiency of this system. The amount of time, energy, money, and mental effort expended on this endless cycle of visiting and card minus leaving is staggering. Was it, as some critics at the time argued, a colossal waste of human potential, a system designed to keep the leisured classes occupied with meaningless ritual? The counter-minus argument, and the one that many social historians find compelling, is that it was anything but meaningless. It was the work of society. It was the constant, painstaking process of maintaining social cohesion, of reinforcing hierarchies, of policing boundaries, and of communicating complex social information in a world without instantaneous communication. It was a low-minus-stake, high-minus-context social network. The inefficiency was, in fact, its most important feature. It was a system that required and rewarded a huge investment of personal effort, and in doing so, it bound the members of society together in a web of mutual, time-minus-consuming obligation. You successfully execute your complex call on Lady Blevins and Miss Primrose. You are starting to think and operate within the rules of this strange, silent world. The system, in all its unwieldy, intricate glory, is becoming second nature to you. You are part of the machine, but you have no idea that a real machine, a strange new invention of wires and electricity, is about to arrive, and its loud, insistent ringing will be the death knell for the silent, subtle world you have worked so hard to master. Years go by. You have become a master of the cardboard language. Your name is established. Your social calendar is full. The world of calling cards, once a source of terror, is now the familiar, predictable rhythm of your life. And then, one afternoon, you hear a sound that changes everything. You are visiting a particularly modern-minded acquaintance, a gentleman fascinated by new inventions and scientific progress. As you are sitting in his study, a strange, shrill, metallic ringing suddenly erupts from a device on his desk. It is a startling, ugly, and incredibly insistent sound. It is a telephone. Your friend excuses himself and picks up a receiver attached to the machine by a cord. "Hello?" He barks into it. "Yes, speaking. What's that? Tomorrow at 3? Excellent. Goodbye." He puts the receiver back with a clatter. The entire exchange has taken less than 30 seconds. He turns back to you, his face beaming with pride at this new technological marvel. "Extraordinary, isn't it? A man from my club, arranging a meeting. No need for cards, no need for messengers. Instantaneous. You are not sure it is extraordinary. You find it rather alarming." The sound was jarring, an assault on the quiet peace of the afternoon. The conversation was stripped of all pleasantry, all ritual. It was a blunt, crude exchange of information. It was efficient, yes, but it was without grace. It was a rude interruption. This, you realize with a sinking feeling, is the future, and it has no place for the silent, subtle dance you have spent years perfecting. The telephone begins its slow, inexorable invasion of London life. At first, it is a novelty for the rich, a toy for the scientifically inclined, but its utility is undeniable. Why send a servant with a card to inquire if a friend is at home when you can simply ring them up and does? Why go through the laborious process of leaving a P.T.C. card when you can call your 10 closest friends and inform them of your travel plans in half an hour? The calling card system was built on a foundation of slowness, distance, and the filtering presence of servants. The telephone demolishes all three of these pillars. It is immediate. It is direct. It bypasses the butler entirely. It allows a person to project their uninvited voice directly into the private sanctuary of another's home. In the context of Victorian etiquette, it is an instrument of almost unimaginable forwardness. Etiquette manuals of the late 19th and early 20th centuries are filled with wonderfully anxious attempts to tame this new beast. A telephone conversation should be brief. One should not shout into the receiver. It is considered improper to conduct matters of great emotional significance, such as a proposal of marriage or an expression of condolence, over the telephone. They are trying to wrap the old rules of decorum around a technology that is inherently indecorous. Here's a detail that social historians love. For a time, the two systems existed in an awkward, overlapping truce. A person might telephone to ask if a lady was at home before setting out to make a formal call. Or, after a telephone conversation, one might still send a follow-up card as a formal acknowledgement. But the writing was on the wall. The efficiency of the telephone was simply too seductive. The decline of the calling card is a classic case of technological disruption. The intricate, silent language of folded corners cannot compete with the sheer, brute force of the spoken word, transmitted by electricity. The First World War would accelerate this decline, shattering the old social structures and making the elaborate rituals of the Edwardian-era seem frivolous and irrelevant. The world became faster, louder, and less formal. The delicate ecosystem that the calling card needed to survive an abundance of leisure time, a rigid social hierarchy, a reliance on servants was vanishing. You look at your own calling card case, the leather now softened and burnished with age. It feels like a relic from another time, even though that time was only yesterday. The world it represents a world of silence, subtlety, and unspoken rules is fading. A new world of direct, efficient, and often jarring communication is dawning. The quiet rustle of a calling card on a silver tray is being replaced by the shrill, demanding ring of the telephone. The silent, secret language is slowly being forgotten. You are an old man now, the London of your youth, the city of gaslight, horse-drawn cabs, and impenetrable fogs, has dissolved into a memory. The world is a cacophony of motor cars and electric lights. The rigid, silent society you so painstakingly learned to navigate has been replaced by something faster, looser, and infinitely louder. One afternoon, clearing out a dusty old writing desk, you find it, your old calling card case. The leather is cracked, the silver clasp tarnished, but it still opens with a familiar, gentle click. Inside, there are a few of your cards left, yellowed with age. Mr. John Smith, the name of a young man full of ambition and anxiety. You hold one of the small, stiff rectangles in your hand. It feels like a ghost, a phantom from a lost world. You remember the stern face of the stationer, the terror of the butler's gaze, the quiet triumph of being told a lady was at home. You remember the secret language of the folded corners, a code that once held the power to make or break a person's social life. It all seems like a strange, elaborate dream. What is left of that world? The calling card itself is not entirely dead. It has undergone a transformation. It has shed its social skin and has been reborn as the modern business card. You look at a business card from your son's desk. It is a different creature entirely. It is packed with information: a company logo, a job title, a telephone number, an email address. Its purpose is not to navigate society, but to facilitate commerce. It is direct, practical, and utterly devoid of mystery. The only ghost of its ancestor is its size and shape. That the spirit of the calling card, you realize, lives on in other, more subtle ways. You see its ghost in the formal, printed wedding invitation, a direct descendant of the Mr. and Mrs. cards sent out by newlyweds. You see it in the sending of a sympathy card, a modern, more expressive version of leaving a condolence you fold. You see it in the modern act of unfollowing someone on social media, a digital, less final version of the Victorian cut. The fundamental human need to manage social connections, to signal respect, to express joy and sorrow, has not changed. Only the tools have. We have traded a silent, high minus context language for a loud, low minus context one. We have traded the nuance of the folded corner for the bluntness of the like button. Historians and sociologists still look back on the era of the calling card with a kind of fascinated wonder. Was it a prison of etiquette, or a masterpiece of non-verbal communication? Was it an oppressive tool of social control, or an elegant system that brought order and grace to human interaction? The truth, as always, is that it was all of these things at once. It was a perfect reflection of the society that created it: rigid, complex, anxious, and obsessed with the power of what was left unsaid. You ran your thumb over the corner of the old card, half minus tempted to make one last fold for old time's sake, the top minus right corner, for a visit made in person, a visit back to a world that no longer exists. You place the card back in its case and close the lid. The click is soft and final. The story is over. The silver trays are all empty now, gathering dust in antique shops. The butlers have all gone. The drawing rooms are silent. All that remains are these small, cardboard ghosts, and the faint, lingering memory of a time when a name, a corner, and a bit of silence could say everything. The little white card in your memory begins to fade. The sharp edges soften, the engraved name blurring into the creamy, yellowed paper. The rigid rules of the drawing room, the quiet tension of the hallway, the precise meaning of each folded corner, they all dissolve into a gentle, hazy stillness. There are no more calls to make, no more social debts to be paid. The endless, exhausting performance of society is over. The gas lights of Victorian London flicker and go out, one by one, replaced by a soft, dreamlike darkness. The clatter of hooves on cobblestone fades into a distant, rhythmic hum, a soothing sound to carry you off to sleep. You have been a visitor in a strange and silent world, a world of unspoken codes and quiet gestures. And now, your visit is over. It is time to leave your final card on the silver tray of the night, and retreat into the deep, peaceful privacy of your own slumber. The end of the article. Good night.